This first story is the most prominent in my brain, and I think it's the oldest as well. But throughout the years, it has stayed with me the longest, and is the first thing I think of when anyone mentions paranormal encounters of any kind. I, by myself, don't attract ghosts. In fact, if ghostly things are happening and I walk into the room, they normally stop. I do not get chills easily. I am also more than happy to go to a haunted house because I want something to happen. I just think ghosts don't find me very fun. I don't give the reaction they want. I have played with many Ouija boards and have owned them myself. They don't scare me and don't work well if I touch them. However, for the sake of this story, I had not played with any of that stuff or realized just how much none of it actually liked to mess with me. All of these stories are because my friend's house or my friend was super haunted at the time. I would only ever experience these things with her or her brother, never by myself. To set up the scene, I'm about 10 years old. My best friend at the time, Z, is about 8, and her brother, D, is 13. My brother, J, is also about 14, and is best friends with D. They often had congruent sleepovers at about the same time I would with Z. So to split up the older kids from the younger kids, one group would get the downstairs living room, and the other group would get the upstairs. This night, it was just me and Z having a sleepover, so we got to pick where we stayed, and we happily chose downstairs. The layout of the house wasn't anything special, but it is worth noting for this story. The front of the house had 2 points of entry, the front door and the garage door. The front door held a large frosted glass pane surrounded by dark wood. A strip of tile made up the walkway from it, passing through a good-sized dining area. Past that, there was a staircase to the left and the garage door to the right. Then, the kitchen is directly beside the stairs, and the large living room is on the side of the garage. They had a TV in an old entertainment center against the wall to the garage, and 2 couches in front. The kitchen was an open layout with cabinets lining the back wall and the fridge closer to the living room. All this is important for later. Before this first sleepover, I did not know the house was haunted. I hadn't heard any stories from Z because we honestly hadn't been friends all that long yet. I met her through my brother, but we became fast friends. I remember us raiding her pantry of literally all the snacks we could find and playing Digimon for most of the night. Her parents really didn't care what we did, as long as everything was cleaned up afterward. Most of the night went well, and like stupid kids, we tried to stay up as late as possible, telling stories and messing with each other. I believe it was around 2 in the morning. We were both getting pretty tired, but determined not to sleep. And suddenly, we heard someone come down the stairs. We both expected to either see D or possibly their dad, but nothing was there. It was just the sound of shoes on the carpet. Then those shoes began to tap along the tile, and we followed the noise with our heads. There was only the light of the TV screen, but after the sound passed the threshold of the kitchen, we could see a fully formed black figure. It was much too thin to be anyone in her family. It was honestly too thin to be a person. But it walked along towards the sink, walking towards the pantry on the left, before turning around. Then it started a slow walk, opening every cabinet as it passed them. Its back faced us the entire time. As if it was searching for something, it opened the top cabinet, then knelt down to the bottom and opened that too. Me and Z could only sit stunned. We didn't know what to do, but I remember being convinced it was her dad, despite us not seeing anyone walk down the stairs. So I called out his name. The shadow stopped at the fridge. Its head turned to me before it opened the fridge. As soon as the light turned on, it was gone. Me and her didn't sleep that night. It took us a good 20 minutes to muster up the courage to go over there and shut the fridge. But that was one of the longest encounters with a ghost I have ever had. It took its time to open everything up. We did almost get in trouble because we didn't want to stick around and close up everything. Like every kid, we just wanted to huddle under some blankets and pretend everything was fine, which was pretty much what we did until the sun came up. Let me begin by saying that I am a Muslim woman, originally from the Middle East. Throughout my 36 years of life, I have experienced my share of paranormal events, but my encounter with the Djinn Doctor stands out as the most extraordinary of them all. When I was a baby in 1988, I had a blood problem that required a transfusion. Unfortunately, the blood I received was contaminated with HCV, hepatitis C. I didn't learn about it until I was 16, when a routine test revealed my condition. A quantitative PCR test showed that the viral load in my blood was in the millions, indicating a severe infection. To spare you the medical details, I'll just say that I underwent multiple harsh treatments, many of which had side effects as intense as chemotherapy. Despite all this, the results were disappointing. A couple of years later, my father told me about a friend who had seen a healer in Jordan. This friend had been diagnosed with liver cirrhosis and was given less than 6 months to live. Yet, after visiting the healer, he returned with a completely healthy liver. Desperate for a solution, we decided to book a flight to Jordan the following week. My father, my brother, who has type 1 diabetes, and I were on this journey. When we arrived and met the healer, I was surprised to find that he looked like an ordinary man in his 30s, handsome, neatly dressed in a suit, and living in a beautifully furnished villa. But there was something unusual about him. He told us that they could heal liver problems, but that they were still working on a diabetes treatment, so there was nothing he could do for my brother. I couldn't help but notice his peculiar demeanor. Though he looked at us, his eyes seemed distant, as if he were seeing something beyond us. His way of speaking was also odd. He would pause for long moments before responding, almost as if he were translating for someone who didn't speak the same language. The healer explained the treatment. I would need to spend 3 consecutive nights at his farmhouse in the suburbs of Amman. The instructions were specific. I had to perform wudu, the ritual washing before prayer, and recite 3 to 4 specific verses from the Quran. I was to lie on my back all night without turning to my side, and if I needed to use the restroom, I was to recite the verses before getting up and again upon returning to bed. The farmhouse was sparse and quiet, with just a couple of twin beds in the main area. I brought my own pillow, bedsheet, and blanket. That first night, fear gripped me. I prayed fervently and recited more verses than the healer had instructed, seeking comfort and protection. As the hours passed, I began to feel sleepy. Suddenly, I felt my body being lifted about a foot off the mattress. My heart raced, but I stayed still. Then I felt a strange sensation in my abdomen, specifically on the right side where my liver is located. It was as if invisible hands were squeezing and moving my liver. Oddly, there was no pain, just pressure and movement. After some time, the sensation stopped, and I drifted into a peaceful sleep, waking occasionally, but feeling surprisingly rested. A few hours later, my father woke me, saying the healer had told him it was time to leave. We repeated the process for the next 2 nights. On the final day, the healer gave me 3 large bottles of water, which he referred to as blessed water. He instructed me to drink a small cup at specific times each day for a month. We returned home, and I followed his instructions. After the month was over, I went for another PCR test. To my amazement, the results showed that the viral load in my blood was 0, not detected. Though the virus was technically still present in my blood, my liver function tests came back perfectly normal. In fact, The doctor at the lab told me my liver seemed healthier than most people without HCV. I was extremely happy. After years of failed treatments, this outcome felt miraculous. But I couldn't help wondering, how had the healer done it? Was it some form of advanced paranormal medicine, or was it witchcraft? When I told my grandmother about the experience, she explained that Djinn are believed to have advanced medical knowledge far beyond humans. She said some Djinn help humans through intermediaries, acting as doctors for ailments conventional medicine can't cure. She told me the healer was likely a medium, channeling the abilities of a Djinn Doctor. Even now, I don't know what to make of it. Was I truly treated by a Djinn Doctor? Or was it something else entirely? What do you guys think? Before I begin, this is a true story, and I'm of sound mind. When I was 7, my family moved into a haunted house. There was an abandoned house that my friends and I would pass on our walk to school. It needed a lot of work. The grass was overgrown like a hayfield, and the driveway was torn up. It looked like it hadn't been lived in for years. My friend and I decided one summer day to check it out. We thought it would be a good idea to smash some of the windows out. We broke a sliding glass door and poked our heads in. It immediately gave us chills. It was super eerie and oddly cold for a summer day. We dipped out and never went back. Fast forward a few months, and my parents tell me that we're moving. I jumped in the truck to go with them to look at the house. When we arrived, my heart sank. It was the same house. I was so nervous. I thought they knew my friend and I had broken the windows, and I was going to be in trouble. They didn't say a word about it. It was just by some fluke chance it was the same house. We moved in, and my stepdad fixed the place up a bit. It was still eerily cold inside, and I remember the layout being very strange. The kitchen was in the basement, and a long L-shaped hallway went behind the kitchen and led to nowhere. The weird events started shortly after. The first one was when I was lying in bed one morning. I was awake, but with the covers over my head. I felt something I could only describe as a fist being dropped on my face. I ripped the covers down off my head immediately to see who it was. Nobody was there. I kind of shrugged it off as a weird occurrence. Later, I'd find out something was in the house, and it was pissed off at me. I can only assume it was mad at me for breaking the windows. I was walking down the stairs to the basement one day when I felt a shove in the middle of my back. It pushed me off the last 2 steps, like plain as day, as if someone was behind me. I glared behind me. Nothing. Again, I shrugged this off as another weird occurrence, until it happened again. Exact same staircase, the exact same steps. Something pushed me for the second time in the last 2 steps. I didn't want to tell anyone, because I figured they would think I was crazy, and truth be told, I thought I might have been a little crazy. Fast forward a few months, and my stepdad tells us that he had something freaky happen to him. He was redoing the bathroom tile, and said he saw a face in the tiles looking back at him. But it wasn't his reflection. It was a different face. We ended up moving out of there, and decades went by before I thought of it again. I told my wife the story and wanted to bring her to the house. We drove to it, and lo and behold, it was exactly as it was almost 30 years ago. Abandoned, the grass overgrown, and no renovations done to it. I drove by it the other day, and it looks like someone is living there. I'd love to talk to them to see if they experience anything, but I don't want to freak them out. I think a demon took an interest in me. Okay, this will mainly be a summary, but I got into a bad fight with my parents while moving out to my sister's that left me pretty depressed. I've been depressed all my life, but started sinking into a pretty bad hole because of the situation. and started some unhealthy coping mechanisms with sleep and even some SH. I was deep in a pit for a while, just contemplating every day, and not eating or leaving the house much, only sleeping, when I had a weird dream. Quick note, I never really have scary dreams or nightmares unless I sleep on my back, and I hardly ever remember my dreams. But I remembered this one, even though whenever I think of it, my memory is foggy, as if my brain is trying to forget. In this dream, I was lying on my bed and I was paralyzed. It wasn't actually sleep paralysis, because I knew it was a dream and I was not awake. Standing at the foot of my bed was an entity that I knew in my mind was a demon. I do not remember what it looked like or how it sounded. Every time I try to recall it, my mind goes foggy. I believe this is because some higher power doesn't want me to remember it, and it is for my own protection. So, I don't even try to. Anyway, for some reason, I felt no fear, even though I knew it was a demon, like I knew it wasn't able to hurt me. So instead, it spoke. I don't remember the exact dialogue, but the demon said something like this. "I know you're in a lot of pain, and I can take over for you and end it if you just let me in." It continued to try to convince me to just let me hand over my body, and it would take care of everything for me. But little did it know, I was paralyzed, so I couldn't even respond, LOL. What's more is that I woke up barely remembering the dream and was about to write it off. But when I went to shower that night, I saw some strange scratches on my chest. I sadly didn't take a picture of it because I honestly thought it would be bad for my mental health to remember. But now, it is all I can think about. The scratches weren't that deep, but it was some sort of symbol, or I thought it was Roman numerals, but I do not know if they work that way. Hi, this is the first time I'm sharing this story with anyone besides my fiancé. I've never felt like telling it because it's quite sad and has elements of horror. Anyways, I grew up in a rented house with a history of 3 deaths. First, a man fell from the roof. Then there was a young girl whose cause of death we never knew. Lastly, the owner's toddler fell down the cemented stairs. The house was big and elevated from the ground, so it had stairs. I'll try my best to describe the interior of the house. I do have pictures, but they're at my grandma's. I'll put some up when I get a chance to go there or find them. The house had 3 rooms: the master's bedroom, the second bedroom, a secret room with a small window where my brother and I were sent when we acted spoiled. This secret room was where our dad would lock us in. I remember feeling fear whenever we were dragged in, but I don't remember why. The room wasn't nice at all, just plain old cement with no paint. The small window was high up, so it might have been a storage room. Eerily, my parents always locked the door and never stored anything in it, unless my brother and I fought. Then we would be there alone. It was sad and horrible how we were treated, and terrifying to be led through a narrow hallway to a door at the end. There were also paranormal activities in the house, and we identified 3 entities, which were obviously the people who passed away. The malicious one was the man. Our housemaid, and even neighbors, would tell us they heard someone calling out even when the house was empty, often when we were on vacation or at school, and my parents were working. When we left the house for weeks, we would hire someone to look after it, but they would immediately ask to leave the next day. Even our family members refused to stay there. Reported activities included trying to open the bathroom door when someone was taking a bath, things or cabinet doors being opened or moved, family pictures with unknown shadows, someone standing in front of bedroom doors or windows. Neighbors complained about noise, even when the house was empty. I would love to go on and tell you every terrifying thing that happened in that house, but it would take a day. So, I'll skip to the part where the entity started doing doppelgangers. My dad was mostly seen with the doppelganger. Relatives would see him outside the house, even though he was in a different city. There was an incident where the owner of the house wanted to check on it and called out to my dad from outside, but he wouldn't turn around or notice her. A lot happened, and as a child, I didn't like it. I grew up in an abusive household, witnessing my parents' ruthless and hatred-filled fights. There was a time when my mom locked us in with her, crying for her life because my dad was hurting her, all while living in that terrifying house. But as an adult, I wonder if all those horrors happened because of my parents' hatred and how we were so apart. Even though we lived under the same roof, it's like the evil spirit, or whatever you want to call it, came creeping in because we were so vulnerable. My brother and I obviously have traumas and scars that are hopefully healing. I just can't get over how I remember every single thing in that house. Writing this and remembering everything is tough. Maybe the best way to sum up how I feel is like that one movie scene where a person stands with a dark shadow clinging to them, metaphorically representing a weight that's too dark, making them feel horrible. Additionally, I believe that the negative energy from my family's constant fighting and hatred made us more susceptible to dark spirits. The entities that haunted our house seemed to feed off our pain and fear, thriving in the toxic environment. It was as if our vulnerability and the darkness within our family invited these malevolent forces into our lives, creating a vicious cycle of fear and suffering. If it weren't for us moving, I believe I might be in a very different place today, maybe even a troubled individual. As a kid, my mum would burn my gory drawings, and she felt terrible about it. I was isolated at school and terrified to talk to anyone, but I'm grateful that I told my mum we should move. Everything went sideways after that, but at least I didn't have to witness my parents fighting and experiencing that horror. I always tell my fiancé that I never wanted to be like my parents, or at least how they were with each other. Don't get me wrong, they did their best to provide for us, food, education, and even some of our wants. However, they struggled to take care of us emotionally and mentally. I had to grow up quickly and mature. So please, if you have a child, listen to them and consider their feelings in every decision you make. And if your significant other is someone you no longer feel love for, just leave. I know this was supposed to be a scary story, but nothing is scarier than experiencing real-life pain that can affect you for the rest of your life. On top of that, there are the never-ending, unexplainable paranormal events that some of us encounter. House pick I show on the screen. Throughout my life, I've had some weird experiences. Seems this is the place to write about them. I have given them names that might sound silly, but at the times, I was scared shitless, and this is probably a coping mechanism. When I was still living at home and was around 16, the first ghost appeared. Me and my sister have dubbed them sweaty feet. At night, when all the lights were out sometimes, we could hear something walking in our rooms. They were named sweaty feet because it sounded like a person with wet, sweaty feet walking. You would hear the feet rising from the floor and making the slurpy sound only wet feet make. If this does not paint a picture, imagine being sweaty while standing up from a leather couch. This is the only ghost multiple people heard. Me and my sister, one, on different nights, in different rooms, over many years. I was around 16 as well. This one only happened once. I didn't sleep for a few days after this one. This one is called Freddy. When trying to go to sleep, I hear scratching on the connecting wall between my bedroom and my second sister's bedroom. I sounded like something with Freddy Krueger's knife hands, sliding his knives slowly over the wall. I knew my sister, too, was not at home that night, so the room should be empty. I was too scared to move, so I called my mum and my sister, one, who didn't pick up because, well, 3 a.m. is not a good time to call people. They asked me about it the next morning, and I told the story. No one heard anything, but we went to go take a look at my sister's 2 room, where I heard the sound. There was nothing visible on the walls, but there was a water trail leading from the middle of her room and stopping at my room. This water trail passed a door and defied gravity to reach my door, because we were first thinking it might be a leak. A leak would not explain the impossible route the trail took. I was 20 around this one, and I named this one Tocker. This translates to something like tapper, from tapping on something. I was staying up way too late playing computer games on the family PC downstairs. At a certain point, I heard something tapping on the window. About 1 tap every 5 seconds, very consistent. My first thought was the wind, but after a few minutes and the consistency of the tapping, once. Every 5 fucking seconds, I got scared and just ran upstairs to my bedroom. I think this is the only night in my life I did not brush my teeth, because moving to the bathroom would move me closer to the window. All was well when I was in my bed on the 3rd floor, until it started again. 1 tap every 5 seconds on my bedroom window, a place that should be unreachable, the last one and the first one since moving out of my mother's house. Mr. Echo. I was 22 at this time, just standing in my apartment smoking out a window. All of a sudden I hear something. It sounded like whispering, at the volume of someone talking, so pretty loud whispering. This is harder to explain. English is not my first language. I could not see anything, but the origin of the sound was clear. I heard the whispering, and I could follow with my eyes where it was originating and where it was going. It moved through my living room in a straight line, and when it passed my dresser, a picture frame fell over and broke. When it reached the windows, it took a turn to the left and then stopped when reaching an open window. Many years ago, when I was a 12-year-old kid, now 19, my grandmother and I would often visit open houses for fun to kill time. Being closer to central Pennsylvania, homes would be far older than average. Dilapidated wooden houses often sold for their land. Brick houses that had stood for up to a century, but one stuck out more than the rest. An eerie, red brick home that was in the middle of nowhere. The only way to and from this forested residence was a single rocky path. When first arrived, there were a few people casually checking out the house's surroundings. The old brick building had an added wooden deck and seemingly updated windows, very obviously installed by the previous owner due to its shabby look. However, what stuck out most to me were the various bones littered across the yard. My memory is a little hazy when it comes to these details, but my guess at the time was chicken bones. These must have been some well-fed chickens though, for how big these bones were. We eventually made it inside the house and did some exploring. Overall, it was a pretty normal experience, as my grandmother and I checked out an old piano and furniture within the rooms. It was when we got to the attic that things became off. We were the only ones up in the attic, a moldy and dim place with some boxes in the back. I immediately felt like I was being watched. I never knew how heavy the feeling of eyes could be, even if there were none. I pressed on, however, not wanting to worry my grandmother with my paranoia over nothing, I thought. As I went forward, there was a window, closed, with just a massive pile of dead ladybugs on the windowsill. No flies, spiders, stink bugs, just thousands of dead ladybugs. To this day, I still can't figure out why. I couldn't find anything on sickness mold that would target ladybugs or traps, that would cause that. The final part was when my grandmother made it to the back of the attic, undeterred by these events, and searched through a box hidden behind some clothes racks. A photo of a seemingly Amish family of 8 was found. As she picked it up for us to get a closer look, we felt some sort of overwhelming presence. It's hard for me to describe, as I've never had problems with my body, still being young, but it can only be described as a massive panic attack. The feeling of flight or fight, as if a bear were in the same room as me. How could this one photo affect me to the point of having close to a heart attack at such a young age? It was when my grandmother looked back at me with the same fear in her eyes that I knew it wasn't just paranoia. We ran out of there like a bolt of lightning and never looked back. While there wasn't something with a figure I could physically see or hear, my grandmother being there, feeling what I felt, is what stopped my second guesses. It's made me wonder through my childhood about the existence of souls, that we aren't just some wires and meat, but have an existence beyond where our feet take us. It's satisfying to know we mean more, if that makes sense, but also crippling. The newfound stress of perfectly making the most out of life, the fear of possibly being tethered to a space on Earth, fueled by memories of what could have been, rather than what can I do that life provides. Perhaps I'm engrossed too much in the past than I should be, and/or thinking too negatively while jumping to conclusions. I often wish I had followed the warnings and gone back downstairs to be forever in ignorance of the future. But humans do what they do best and let curiosity guide the way. The awesome part about reading this is that you make your own judgment about my words. I could be lying, dehydrated at the time, maybe mentally unwell, and you can live life through your own beliefs. However, if there's a thing you can take from this account, it's to not take warnings lightly and respect others' properties. Have a neat day. Have you ever had a paranormal experience? A moment where reality blurred with something sinister, something unexplainable? We want to hear your story. Send us your encounters via email or voice note, and your tale may be featured in one of our upcoming videos. If you enjoyed this chilling journey into the unknown, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Join us as we continue to uncover the world's most terrifying mysteries. Until next time, stay curious and stay safe.